A Boeing 747, carrying 524 people, is out of control above Japan. Alarms fill the cockpit, oxygen masks drop. Passengers write final notes. The aircraft's tail has exploded. Can the pilots get it back to the airport? This is the story of Japan Airlines Flight 123. On August 12, 1985, the fully loaded 747 departed Tokyo's Haneda Airport for Osaka. It was the Aben holiday season. The flight was short, barely an hour. In the cockpit, First Officer Yutaka Sasaki upgrading to captain, supervising him veteran Captain Masami Takahama. Behind them, flight engineer Hiroshi Fukuda, all highly experienced. At 6:12 p.m. they took off. Climbing through 24,000 feet, the cabin pressurized normally, but hidden in the tail was a fatal flaw. Years earlier, the aircraft had suffered a hard landing in Osaka. The rear pressure bulkhead was damaged and improperly repaired. Over thousands of flights, tiny cracks spread. Now 12 minutes after takeoff, the bulkhead failed. Explosive decompression tore through the rear cabin. A huge section of the tail separated, including the vertical stabilizer and critical hydraulic lines. Cabin panels ripped free. Oxygen masks dropped. In the cockpit, warnings blared. The captain declared an emergency and turned back toward Tokyo. But as they banked, the aircraft rolled steeply. Control inputs did nothing. All hydraulic pressure was gone. Without hydraulics, the control surfaces were useless. The rudder was missing. The pilots could not directly control pitch, roll, or yaw. The aircraft began a violent Dutch roll, swinging side to side. It also entered a fugate cycle, climbing, losing speed, descending, gaining speed, over and over. Passengers felt the aircraft lurch thousands of feet at a time. The pilots had one tool left: engine thrust. By carefully adjusting power, they tried to stabilize altitude. Slowly, they reduced the severity of the oscillations. Air traffic control offered vectors. Communication faded as the crew struggled to focus. At 24,000 feet, hypoxia began affecting them. They were so focused on flying that they delayed putting on oxygen masks. Meanwhile, in the cabin, flight attendants fought to manage panic. The engineer reported rear structural damage. The pilots barely responded. Eventually, they agreed to descend, but descent proved difficult. Control columns had no effect. The engineer suggested lowering the landing gear using the alternate gravity system. The captain hesitated. Any change might destabilize them further. They lowered it. The gear extended. Vertical motion improved slightly, but lateral rolling worsened. Still, they continued. Using asymmetric thrust, they managed a slow turn back toward Tokyo. Finally, with reduced power and gear down, the aircraft began descending below 20,000 feet. Oxygen levels improved. The crew's thinking cleared. Ahead lay mountainous terrain. To avoid it, they increased power and climbed steeply, too steeply. Speed dropped. The stick shaker activated. They reduced power. The aircraft pitched down sharply, entering a dive. Full thrust, another steep climb, then another stall warning. The cycle repeated: climb, stall warning, dive, each more extreme than the last. A witness later described the plane as moving like a staggering drunk. The first officer suggested lowering flaps using the electrical backup system. The flaps began extending slowly. Careful thrust timing stabilized the aircraft again. For the first time since the explosion, it flew roughly level. They contacted Tokyo. They were 55 miles northwest of Haneda. There was still a chance. But the flaps continued extending unevenly. The left extended further than the right, creating imbalance. The aircraft began banking right. The captain called for 10 degrees of flaps, unaware they had already passed that point. The first officer advanced thrust unevenly, more on the left than the right. The bank increased. The aircraft rolled further and entered a rapid descent. At just 9,000 feet, there was little room to recover. They pulled back with all their strength. Too late. The right wingtip and engine struck a ridge. The aircraft flipped and impacted the mountainside in Nagano, breaking apart and igniting. Air traffic control lost radar contact. A military aircraft reported flames in the mountains. Rescue efforts were delayed until morning. By the time teams reached the site, 12 hours later, only 4 of the 524 people on board had survived. Investigators determined the cause: improper repair of the rear pressure bulkhead years earlier. After the crash, Boeing redesigned the 747's tail structure and modified hydraulic protections. Japan Airlines strengthened maintenance oversight. Flight 123 remains the deadliest single aircraft accident in history. It led to major safety improvements and lasting lessons about structural repair, system redundancy, and emergency response.